So I had to make a video on this one.
Oh my.
Nexon is a pretty big company that I've been familiar with for nearly all of my MMO career. I've played MapleStory, Mabinogi, Vindictus, and plenty of other titles from them. Now, MMO looter shooters are less my forte, but I've put some time into Destiny 2 and Warframe before, so this game wasn't really anything way out of left field for me. The First Descendant, a free-to-play third-person looter shooter that riffs quite a lot of popular tropes from games in the past decade, is the subject of today's video. Its biggest inspirations are the two games I mentioned earlier. It takes the progression systems from Warframe, its open world game style from Destiny 2, the massive loot collection from looter shooters, the heroes available to play remind me of games like Overwatch. Honestly, I never even heard of this game until I was browsing Steam one day, just checking out some things to play. I enjoyed the short time I had with Warframe, and anytime a new MMO or online game like this launches, its launch month is always the best time to jump in, so I figured I'd give it a shot. It's also been covered by nearly every big content creator I watch under the sun, from Upper Echelon to Angry Joe. It's got quite a bit of attention on it right now.
Probably because not only is the game free, but it released day one with crossplay and cross-save between PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, as long as you set up a Nexon account.
But ultimately, is it actually fun to play? Well, let's check out The First Descendant.
The story of The First Descendant follows humanity fighting against the Vulgus, alien invaders that have nearly wiped out humanity. Along with the Vulgus are the Colossi, giant monsters that are also attacking mankind, seemingly separate from the Vulgus. You are a Descendant, someone who has harnessed an ancient power that will help in the fight for humanity's survival. You are tasked as a Descendant to find the MacGuffins called the Iron Hearts, guided by an AI program only the Descendants can see named Guide. Essentially, you are humanity's last hope. A pretty simple storyline we've seen a bajillion times at this point in the games industry. Basically defend humanity against the big bad guy. Boring. Luckily, the game graphically is rather strong, with beautiful cinematics that remind me of the Final Fantasy series, honestly. Sound design is also pretty solid in-game, with sound effects feeling accurate to what they should sound like, as well as having some pretty decent tunes to listen to as you run through dungeons. Nexon put quite a lot of money into this project, and it shows via the graphics and how the game plays, but let's start with how the game begins, which is the tutorial. Upon loading into the game for the first time, you are met with a tutorial mission where you are given a choice of what Descendant to start with between three choices. First is Viessa, who is essentially a frost mage. Her mechanic is slowing down enemies with her ice and even freezing them. Next is Lepic. Lepic is a grenadier. His gameplay revolves around his signature grenade and bombs to blow up enemies. Lastly is Ajax, a void tank. He can create force fields that will absorb enemy gunfire and protect you and your allies. Now, your choice here is pretty important because it will determine which Descendants you actually unlock from the beginning. The other two you will have to unlock through farming their materials, aka a lot of grinding. Man, that sucks! I wish the tutorial mission here at least lets you test between the three Descendants, as all you get in terms of information is their abilities, not much else. At least from what I could find. So once you make your choice, the tutorial begins. The tutorial should only take you about 10 minutes to complete and will teach you just about everything you need to know. Combat, movement, grappling, abilities, etc. Once you complete the tutorial, you are plopped into Albion.
Albion Online is a sandbox.
No, not that Albion. Albion, the headquarters for the Descendants. This is essentially this game's town hub where you can take on quests, queue for dungeons, bosses, upgrade gear, change Descendants, and so on. Following the main storyline quest will teach you about the other features the game has to offer. Let's start with combat. Combat in First Descendant is a third-person shooter. Enemies typically spawn out in the open world in a horde-like fashion as they attack your objective, or in the case of boss arenas, they are the main enemy you are fighting. Depending on your hero and gun choices, essentially your build, will determine how you fight enemies. As you can imagine, if you have an assault rifle, you can spray gunfire without having to be too accurate, versus sniper rifles that will require a bit more accuracy from the player. Movement is also pretty major during combat. You can run, dodge, double jump, and grapple around to avoid gunfire or take cover. Essentially, if you've played Warframe, you know exactly how Descendants combat will be, minus the dodge jump spamming you see in Warframe. Now, as you engage in the game's combat, you will be taking on missions, running through dungeons, and fighting bosses, as well as exploring the several open-world areas. Missions are basically your standard grindable quests in the open-world areas that can be repeated over and over again. Each mission has various loot that you'll want to farm, depending on if you are trying to craft something or trying to farm a specific drop. After all, this is a looter shooter, so get ready to repeat the same quests over and over again, farming specific loot. Thankfully, there is some variety in mission types to help break up the monotony, like capturing points, interacting with objects, or escorting, but by far the most interesting was the data collection missions, which were basically platforming challenges. There is also instanced missions available that generally have a few boss fights, and a variety of objectives to complete if you want a more focused dungeon or objective experience. The bosses or elite enemies in these dungeons will be the main challenges to overcome. Elite enemies in dungeons and missions probably has one of the worst mechanics I've seen in a game though. Most elite enemies have multiple health bars you have to blast through, pretty typical. A lot of the bosses in the other games do this as well. However, in Descendant, elite enemies have a mechanic between each phase that you have to interact with, one of them being this floating ball thing.
Balls of steel.
These balls are an incredibly annoying challenge since in later dungeons, they introduce other small mechanics to them too, so have fun with that. Exploration around the regions is a bit lacking, and in all honesty, it's a bit boring. You see, in a game like Destiny 2, the large open world areas has content you can join in for nearly hours on end. Descendant feels pretty hollow in comparison. Going to an open world area instances you with 3 other players, since the party maximum size in this game is 4. Each area actually has quite a bit of things to do beyond missions like reactors, outposts, collecting data logs, or void fragments, but realistically, they all play similar to one another, or they are incredibly short. There's only so many times you can spend gunning down enemies in a central objective-based mission before you get bored. The game really needs random events that occur in the open world or other group activities to really encourage going out and roaming around in each available landscape. Besides the open world areas, you have instance colossi encounters where you can group with other players to take down a central boss. At the time of this video, there is only a handful of these bosses available to fight, and generally they are either a complete cakewalk or actual challenges depending on who you get matched up with. There is harder difficulty options available to be unlocked for all the content in the game, but that isn't available until you basically complete the main story quest, which you'll have trouble doing unless you power up. Getting stronger in the First Descendant is basically ripped directly from Warframe, barring a few differences. I mentioned earlier 3 different heroes you can play as and unlock, being Viessa, Ajax, and Lepic. Each hero can be leveled up to a maximum level of 40, with each level granting new abilities, powering up current ones and increasing your own stats. There are 14 playable characters in total, with each one leveling up separately from one another. In total, we have Lepic, Ajax, Viessa, Blair, Jaber, Essimo, Bunny, Freyna, Glay, Sharon, Valby, Kyle, Enzo, and Eugen, with ultimate forms for Lepic, Ajax, Bunny, Viessa, and Glay. The ultimate forms are essentially just better versions of the base character, but they are unlockable just like the others. In addition to leveling up characters, you can also level up your guns, with 3 being equipable all at once. From what I could tell from the weapons unlock menu, there is a total of 76 different guns to play with in-game at the current time of this video, with more incoming as well as more playable Descendants on the horizon. Now, it's important to actually level up everything you get your grubby little hands on over time, because once again, just like Warframe, everything you you level adds to your total mastery level, each hero you level and each gun. So it's worth unlocking every hero and gun over time and playing them to max level to increase your mastery rank. Your mastery levels unlock content, increase the maximum amount of mods you can equip, and how many inventory slots you have. Mods are, again, basically the same way they function in Warframe, where your hero and gun has a grid where you can slot in specific perk mods and increase stats. Mods can also be upgraded using currency you earn from gameplay, and the amount of mods you can equip can be increased by prestiging your hero or gun back to level 1 and adding a module socket. Then you have systems like gun level transferring, gun ability readjustments, and enhancing legendary weapon abilities. There's quite a lot of progression systems available to players, and in general, they are all free to engage with as long as you are willing to grind. Researching or crafting in First Descendant is how you earn the more unique guns, as well as how you unlock new heroes. The items you need to research each gun or hero can also be specifically tracked, so it's never really a mystery on how to get certain items. Of course, once you begin researching something, it's time gated until it's complete and obtainable, unless you spend real money to skip the time gate. But trust me, we will get to the cash shop in a moment. Now, I'm sure you are probably thinking to yourself, gunplay is decent, it's more or less a hero-based shooter, seems like a decent foundation. The PvP must be alright, eh? Well, it probably would be pretty decent if the game actually had any PvP. The developers have apparently stated that the game was designed as a purely PvE cooperative looter shooter with no plans of PvP. I can actually respect this decision, but I do feel for my PvP lovers out there. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing a PvP mode someday with some incredibly fundamental changes set specifically for that mode. Another thing that I sort of touched on earlier is the instanced regions. It feels a bit silly to have all these maps segmented into several small regions rather than have them as one big map. I suppose Destiny technically does this as well with hidden loading screens in between each of their sectors, but this would have been a tip in Descendants' favor if they had a truly big open world area where you could play with more than just 3 other players. At least the community is rather friendly and bustling as far as I can tell in terms of early game, with players generally sticking around for missions even if it looks like it will be tough. I can't say the same for endgame content, however, as in World Chat you'll find endgame groups specifically asking for specific characters or builds to help farm or defeat specific bosses. It can be a bit odd in comparison that in most co-op missions, you will rarely have people talk versus in Albion, where the World Chat is zooming by. I suppose this makes a little bit of sense though, since there are a lot of players playing on console that most likely don't even have an attached keyboard, but I did want to mention it. The game is also lacking a guild system for some reason, but honestly I can see Nexon adding one in rather quickly. Anyways, I think I've basically covered nearly everything the game has to offer at this point, so let's finally get to the good old cash shop and monetization. The cash shop in The First Descendant is about what I expected from a free-to-play game. There is tons of cosmetic outfits, XP boosters, gun cosmetics, emotes, and convenience items. The main items I can see a lot of players purchasing is the heroes if they don't want to spend the time to unlock them. In all honesty though, they aren't hard at all to unlock, so I don't recommend spending money on unlocking heroes if you can spend any money at all. There is also a battle pass the game has, which like any other game is just filled with cosmetic unlockables and boosters. Now, full disclosure, I did spend some money on the cash shop getting the starter hero bundle since I was enjoying the game, but at no point during all the time I played did I ever feel like I needed to actually spend any money. In this case, I genuinely just wanted to. In terms of pricing, these bundles are kinda ridiculous though, with the main offenders being the Ultimate Descendant packages. To use the cash shop, you of course can't spend a dollar amount. You have to purchase the cash shop currency called Caliber, which has various package amounts from $5 all the way up to $100 bundles. The premium Ultimate Descendant bundles are $100 each, which means if you wanted to drip out all of your Ultimate Descendants and get the Mac Daddy packages for all of them, it's going to be a whopping $500. Damn! Besides that, the rest of the items are relatively okay, with most cosmetic skins or boosters only costing you at the most $5 to $10, which is pretty average for this genre. An even bigger offender here though is the lack of any trading or auction house in the First Descendant. At least in other games, cosmetics like these are completely tradable, but here anything you purchase or earn is completely locked to you. So if you unlock something you don't particularly care for, you can't sell it or trade it to another player. Overall, the First Descendant is a great bit of competition for the reigning king of sci-fi MMO looter shooters out there like Destiny 2 and Warframe. But in its current standing, I do feel like it's missing some small details and features to really make it a game that will outlast the hype surrounding it. At the time of this video, the game has a relatively middling reception, but ironically it has quite a lot of people playing it. Why is that? First is the weird anti-cheat that Nexon uses in their games. That's a whole different rabbit hole that I won't even get into here, but look into it in some of the Steam reviews. Second is Nexon, and that's really all I have to say. They're just not a very well-liked company. They have certainly published some titles that are near and dear to the American audience, like MapleStory, Mabinogi, and Vindictus, but they've also made some shady business choices in the market, which then leads to the overall summary here, looping back to the question, is the game fun? Yeah. It's actually quite a lot of fun to mindlessly mow down enemies, play as cool looking characters with fun personalities, and level up a bunch of stuff. The problem that most people have is, how greedy will this free-to-play game ultimately be post-launch? This genre in general is pretty egregious for predatory microtransactions, and from how the cash shop currently is, it's definitely heading in the same direction, which is a massive shame, and I can only hope something sets the course in a different direction, but who knows how things will go. Either way, let's wrap up my final thoughts here. The First Descendant is definitely for fans of the looter shooter genre, or at least fans for games like Warframe and Destiny 2. It basically takes a lot of the same gameplay mechanics from those two games and mixes them into one solid experience. The game is graphically pretty good looking. You can definitely push some ridiculous looking quality here if you have the PC to run it. The gameplay in general is actually pretty fun. The gunplay feels good, movement feels solid, the gameplay loop is addicting. It's really everything you could want in an online game. Lastly, one of the biggest tips in this game's favor, regardless of everything going against it, definitely has to be the fact that not only is it free to play, but it's also cross-platform and cross-save, all right from the game's launch. I can't emphasize how much of a boon that has to be for a game, since now not only are you appealing to console users, you also have the convenience of essentially being able to play your account from anything that can run the game, regardless of what platform you normally play on. The open world areas of the First Descendant feel so disjointed and separated for what feels like no real reason other than to have smaller explorable areas. When you look at each zone, it feels like such a strange design choice to separate these areas and not just have it as one big open world map. As much as the game is fully free to play with no restrictions, the game does expect you to grind an enormous amount if you want to earn everything as a free player. I'm talking literal hours of grinding the same missions on end, looking for specific drops just to be able to craft that one item you need. I struggle to say that the game is pay to win since it's purely a co-op experience, but the cash shop has nearly every bad practice in the book here. Battle passes, cash shop currency, convenience items, outrageously priced items, and limited time items feeding on FOMO. It's all here, and you can definitely tell what players have spent a good penny on the game because they will be the ones completely demolishing content or have completely unique unobtainable items because of course all the best looking stuff can only be purchased. Sadly for PvP lovers out there, Descendant doesn't have PvP, and it's been stated that there is no plans for PvP. To me, that is such a shocking statement considering the charm that these characters have. The PvP mode could very well be a third-person Overwatch. If people are concerned that PvP will be unbalanced or influence PvE, just make it so that each hero has their own set kit of guns and abilities that can't be changed and call it a day. Lastly, the game is really just lacking some of the basic online features currently. Things like a guild system or the ability to trade really feel like features that should be here. It's hard to say if this game will still be popular in a month or two, but I guess only time will tell. I mean, look at how New World turned out.
Loser! You're a loser!
Personally, I am really enjoying The First Descendant, but in the back of my mind, it does make me want to take a look at Warframe. Maybe it's time to finally make a video on that. Anyways, are you playing The First Descendant? Comment down below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video to support my content. Follow all my social media links in the description below, and hopefully I will see you all next time.
She got a great ass!